Andy, we have Tim from Holliston, Massachusetts.
You got it. He says, hello again, Joe, Big Al, and Andy. First, thank you for answering my question back in the show 324 regarding a taxable brokerage account versus a 457B deferred comp plan. A brief summary about us. I'm a police officer, 38. My wife, who is 30, works in finance and investing as a data steward. Our gross annual income is roughly $240,000 a year between our two incomes and non-taxable VA disability. He's an Iraq war veteran. Thank you very much, Tim. Our previously mentioned tax-free gift from my in-laws is now going into an ILIT rather than an annual gift directly to us. My wife is maxing out her Roth 401k through her employer, and we backdoor the maximum into each of our Roth IRAs. I have a pension through the police department that will pay 50% at age 55, which is when I plan on stepping away from policing, but not retiring entirely. I have a master's in education and was previously a high school teacher, looking to combine both teaching and experience in law enforcement to teach at a police academy as the years and mileage on my body increase. Now to get to my question, that made me think of the movie Police Academy. I hope that's not what Tim ends up doing. My wife and I recently purchased a home in May of 2021 with 20% down and a fixed 30-year loan of $520,000 at 2.99%. Taking into consideration my age, being a disabled vet, and my job carrying a higher rate of injury, my wife and I are looking to have the ability to pay off the house in 15 years while taking advantage of historically low mortgage rates. We're using our brokerage account as our early mortgage payoff account, contributing $250 a week into 4 indexed ETFs, broad, value, mid-cap, and small cap, with a 40-20, 20-20 allocation respectively. Given a 7% annual expected rate of growth, the balance of this brokerage account should grow to match the principal balance remaining at the 15-year mark of the mortgage amortization. I'm not suggesting cashing out the brokerage account at that time and dealing with a large tax bill just to pay off a low rate mortgage, but rather have the peace of mind to know that if a scenario were to happen where I can no longer work, the balance on our home would not cause a crisis event.
So I think the idea, Tim, is so you're thinking of retiring at age 55, you're 38, you're going to set up a savings account, or I should say an investment account outside of your retirement account that will grow at a 7% rate of return, sufficient enough to pay off your mortgage should you decide to, which is not a bad idea at all. In fact, no. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, debt-free.
Yeah. And so, and you're continuing paying the mortgage as a 30-year, which is fine. Some people decide to go ahead and pay more on the mortgage each month to turn it into a 15-year. That's obviously an advantage too. But as you've already mentioned, the loan rate's 2.99%, which is a good rate relative to what you could earn potentially with investments, and you're targeting 7%, which may or may not happen. So here's the pluses and minuses in that versus just turning this into a 15-year mortgage by paying more each month if you want to. And the main disadvantage is the risk. There's no guarantee that it's going to go up 7% per year annualized for the next 17 years. Mm-hmm. And I guess the other part is, just thinking about the market's done rather well the last 12 years. And so will it continue at this rate? Hard to say. A lot of experts don't necessarily think so. But if you look at the areas of the market that have done exceptionally well in the last decade, it's mostly in the US. International stocks have not done as well. Emerging market stocks, which are companies in countries that are emerging like India, Brazil, to name a couple, they have not done as well. And there's something called reversion to the mean, where these different asset classes, foreign asset classes, will probably at some point outperform. So looking at your allocation, I like the idea that it's all stock, but I think you're missing out on international and emerging markets. And I probably, if it were me at your age, I probably would have at least 30% of my portfolio in international emerging markets. You could do more, you could do less. 20 to 50, would be reasonable.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Emerging markets, those are, especially for someone so young, those that asset class tends to be pretty volatile, but you're compensated with that, right? With a higher rate of return over time.
Right. But anyway, so you might think about your allocation. The concept is fine. And I also agree with you in 15 years or 17 years from now, having the ability to pay off the mortgage is great. You may not want to, because if you truly do earn 7% rate of return, you might want to keep that going. and then you got a mortgage that's 3% roughly.
Mhm.
So you've got that arbitrage. Again, though, it's the risk, right?
Right.
We don't really know what the market's going to do, so think about that. So I guess with that, Andy, go ahead and continue.
All right. So he continues, my thoughts are to slowly tax gain harvest those long-term gains 15 to 17 years from now as I step away from policing and have a reduction in my income. I also like that this money can be utilized as a second emergency fund aside from cash in our savings, rather than having to take out a HELOC and pay the bank to essentially borrow our own money. I'm sure there is more info you could always use in these sorts of questions and conversations, but does this plan seem feasible considering our low mortgage rate and average annual returns of the market? Are there any potential issues I'm missing aside from gradually shifting our investing to include a tax-free bond/fixed income ETFs to reduce the risk over time? Should our allocation be different right now, given a 15 to 17 year window of growth? By the way, we have our first child on the way. He's due on Easter Sunday. Congratulations. I have a question regarding the UTMA versus 529 and all the facets surrounding that decision, but I'll save that for a later show. The three of you keep me smiling, laughing, and informed as I stand in the cold New England weather on a police detail. Thank you for all you do. Been sharing the YMYW podcast with my coworkers. Wow, that's cool. Thank you, Tim.
When you think about an emergency fund, I would say you'd probably want 3 to 6 months in cash, just available in cash. But I really would encourage most of you to have more than that. And anything above that can potentially be invested. I mean, it's not necessarily an emergency fund per se, but investments, liquid investments can be converted to cash within a couple of days. And that's not a bad way to go.
Yeah, I would say with the emergency fund, you almost have to just know yourself a little bit, understand that you might want some of that emergency cash just a little bit tougher to access, kind of like have a lid or a lock on the cookie jar, so to speak, right? So it's not so easy just to sweep it into the checking account.
Yeah, you mean like have a CD or something like that?
Yeah, maybe a
locked up?
CD or something that's a little bit more of a pain to try to access.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, I think that's right. And I think you're right when you said it depends upon the person and the discipline, because a lot of people that try to set up an emergency fund, an emergency happens every week. And
Yeah,
it
right.
doesn't last very long.
Mhm, exactly.
Right. So at any rate, I think the plan is fine. I think we talked about, I think you could potentially reallocate to include international. I like the plan. I also like the idea of not necessarily paying off the mortgage in 15 to 17 years, but at least you've got that option. Right?
Yeah. The other thing too, he mentioned tax gain harvesting. Someone so young with such a long time horizon, he might be able to tax loss harvest over the next 10, 15 years. And he could potentially build up a pretty large capital loss carry forward instead of having to pay a gain to pay off the mortgage. He might have some capital losses to offset any sort of gains. And then he can free up the cash without having to worry about the taxes.
Yeah, I agree with that. Tax loss harvesting is when you have an asset class that goes down, you sell it, you record a loss on your tax return. That loss is available basically for the rest of your life, as well as $3,000 per year for ordinary income. So that can be a good way to go.
Are you prepared for retirement? Schedule a free financial assessment with an experienced financial professional right online at purefinancial.com.